I stood in the wings of the Innovate Summit's main stage with my phone in one hand and a wireless uplink adapter in the other. And I watched Bella cross the stage toward the podium in the floor-length dress her stylist had chosen specifically for this moment. And I thought about the first time I had watched her steal from me. On the screen behind her, her production team had cued the opening slide of her keynote, Creative Innovation in the Digital Age asterisk. Her name below it in the clean sans serif font, her brand guidelines specified, her verified checkmark beside it, her follower count in the lower corner as though follower count were a credential. 3.2 million people built over 2 years on the foundation of a catalog of content that was technically hers in the sense that her name appeared on it and her face was in it, and her voice delivered the ideas. The ideas were mine. All of them, every framework, every analytical model, every joke, including the one she was about to use in the opening of this keynote, which I knew because I had written it 14 months ago in a video that had gotten 4,000 views and which she had reimagined into a short that had gotten 8 million. She reached the podium, the spotlight found her, 300 people in the conference hall and several thousand more watching the live stream gave her the applause she had learned to accept with the specific, practiced humility of someone who has been applauded enough times to understand that false modesty reads as authenticity to an audience that wants to believe in the person performing it. "Thank you," she said into the microphone. "I have to say this is surreal." She touched her collarbone. The gesture was genuine in the way that performed things become genuine through repetition. "I started making content in my bedroom 2 years ago. And now," she gestured at the stage, at the banner with her name on it, at the audience. "I don't know, I just feel like if I can do it, literally anyone can." The audience responded warmly to this. The audience did not know what I knew, but they were about to. I looked at my phone. The uplink was active. The content ID submissions were processed. The sponsor notification emails had been sent. The side-by-side comparison video, 12 minutes long, showing 37 instances of Bella's videos beside my originals with the specific illogical frame sequences highlighted in red, was queued to the conference's AV system through an access credential that the event's technical coordinator had provided when I had registered as a member of the press. I pressed execute to understand how I ended up in those wings with an uplink adapter and a 12-minute video that was about to end a career on live stream. You have to go back to the beginning of the theft and the smear campaign, and the night I stopped trying to defend myself and started building something she would never see coming. I made analytical content. That's the most accurate description of it, not entertainment, not lifestyle, not the kind of content that goes viral because it makes you feel something immediately and uncritically. I made videos about systems, how platforms worked, how algorithmic design affected human behavior, how the architecture of digital spaces shaped the content that proliferated within them. Long-form, carefully researched, densely sourced. The kind of content that accumulated a specific kind of viewer, slow to subscribe, loyal to a degree that conventional metrics underrepresented. The kind of audience that emailed you to discuss the implications of something you had said 6 months ago. I had 42,000 subscribers. I had built that audience over 3 years of consistent output, which averaged one video every 12 days, each one taking between 60 and 100 hours to research and produce. I did it alone, in a workspace that was functional rather than photogenic, 3 monitors, a quality microphone, a camera that cost less than most influencers spent on ring lights, and the specific, accumulated knowledge of someone who had spent years understanding how digital systems worked at the level of their architecture rather than their surface. Bella had found my channel 14 months before the keynote. I don't know exactly when because the copying didn't announce itself. It arrived the way certain things arrive, gradually and then all at once. The first video of hers I noticed was a short about algorithmic bias in recommendation system, which was a topic I had covered extensively, and which she had covered in a way that used my specific framing, my specific examples, my specific structural approach, translated into her visual language and delivered in her register faster, louder, more energetic, stripped of the analytical depth, but retaining the skeleton of the argument. I told myself it was coincidence. The topic was not obscure. Other people could have arrived at the same framing independently. The second video made coincidence implausible. The third made it impossible. By the 7th video in 5 months, she had covered 6 of my last 8 topics in sequence, using my frameworks, my examples, my specific ways of setting up and paying off an argument, translated into content that reached hundreds of times more people than my originals had, generating sponsorship revenue I estimated, conservatively, at somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000. I filed a copyright report with YouTube. The report was reviewed and dismissed within 48 hours, which was the standard outcome for intellectual property claims that involved ideas rather than verbatim text or audio, because ideas are not copyrightable, and the specific execution of a similar idea by a different creator in a sufficiently different visual and auditory register does not trigger copyright protection under the current framework. I knew this would happen. I had covered this exact issue in a video 15 months earlier. I sent her a direct message. I kept it professional, a clear, documented account of the parallel content, the sequential coverage, the structural similarity, a request to acknowledge the influence or cease the practice. She didn't respond to the message. She responded to the situation. The video went up 4 days after I sent the DM. 12 minutes long, her face taking up most of the frame in the way she framed emotional content, close, personal, the aesthetic of intimacy. She called me by name. She showed my DM on screen, screenshotted and zoomed, presented as Exhibit 1 of the harassment she had been experiencing. She explained that a smaller creator, she said *smaller the way you say it when you want the audience to understand the word without having to be explicit about your contempt for it, had been systematically targeting her, falsely accusing her of copying ideas that she had independently developed, sending threatening messages, attempting to damage her reputation because he was unable to accept that someone else had arrived at similar topics through their own creative process. She cried during it, briefly, with the specific, controlled quality of tears that have been practiced rather than felt, but sufficiently real on camera that the comments section received them as genuine. The video got 2 million views in 18 hours. My comment section, which had been a quiet, civil place where people discussed ideas, became something else within the same 18 hours. The messages were variations of a small number of themes: that I was a stalker, a liar, a misogynist who couldn't handle a successful woman, a failing creator trying to drag someone successful down to his level. They came in volume, with the coordinated intensity of a fanbase that had been told what to think about a situation, and had arrived at the thinking immediately and collectively. YouTube's automated systems flagged my channel for harassment based on the volume of reports. 3 of my videos were temporarily restricted while the reports were reviewed. My AdSense revenue, already modest, paused during the review period. I sat at my desk and read the messages. I had a spreadsheet open in one window. I had been maintaining it for 2 months, a side-by-side documentation of my videos and her corresponding content, with dates, view counts, structural comparisons, and specific instances of identical framing. The spreadsheet was thorough. It was also, as I had known from the beginning, legally insufficient for the purpose of stopping what she was doing, and socially insufficient for the purpose of correcting the narrative she was constructing, because I had 42,000 subscribers, and she had 2.1 million, and the internet, when presented with conflicting accounts from those 2 sources, generally resolved the conflict in favor of the larger number. I closed the comment section on my most recent video, not permanently, temporarily, citing the review period. It was the most visible concession I had made in the entire situation, and it looked, to anyone watching, like retreat. It was not retreat. I opened my editing software. I opened a blank project file and I sat in front of it for a moment, in the specific, focused stillness of someone who has finished processing a situation and has arrived at the operational question, not what to do about it in the general sense, but what to do about it in the specific, technical, executable sense that would produce the outcome I needed. She was stealing my content because she was lazy. That was the accurate description of it, not malice exactly, or not only malice, but the specific structural laziness of someone who had discovered that the effort of understanding a thing was unnecessary when the effort of performing the understanding was sufficient for the audience she was performing to. She didn't watch my videos to learn from them. She watched them to extract from them, the way you extract what you need from something you're not interested in preserving. Which meant she wasn't checking my work, she was copying it. The distinction mattered. The distinction was everything. If she had been understanding what I was producing, she would have caught errors. A person who comprehends an argument notices when the argument is wrong. A person who is reproducing an argument without comprehending it reproduces the errors along with the argument, because to them the errors are indistinguishable from the content. They are part of the pattern being copied, not deviations from the pattern. I had covered this principle in a video about misinformation propagation 11 months ago. It was, as it happened, one of the videos she had subsequently covered, using my framework, without understanding that the framework described her own methodology. I started scripting. The video I was building was my best work to date, genuinely, without qualification. The research was real, the argument was sophisticated, the production would be clean and precise, and exactly the kind of content my audience expected from me. It would perform moderately because my channel performed moderately, and it would attract the specific, attentive audience that my content attracted, who would engage with it carefully. And buried in it, at the 23-minute mark, precisely placed in a section where the argument reached its most complex point, and the viewer needed to be tracking carefully to follow the logic, was a mistake. Not a small mistake, a specific, deliberate, illogical error in the analytical framework I was presenting. The kind of mistake that a person following the argument carefully would catch, would flag in the comments, would question. The kind that a person copying the argument without following it would reproduce exactly, because it was structurally indistinguishable from the correct argument unless you understood what the correct argument was. I had chosen the error carefully. It was the kind of error that would propagate consistently. If you copied it, you would copy it completely, because it was woven into the structure of the argument rather than existing as a separate, detachable mistake. And it was the kind of error that would be immediately identifiable as an error by anyone who understood the subject matter, which Bella's audience largely didn't, which was why she had been able to serve them my content repackaged as hers without consequence. Until now, I finished the script at 2 in the morning. I reviewed it 3 times. I confirmed that the error was what I needed it to be: specific, reproducible, inextricably woven into the argument structure, and wrong in a way that would be obvious to any domain expert who examined the content. Then I exported the project file, labeled it with my standard naming convention, and set it aside. I picked up my phone. I looked at the notifications, the ongoing comment activity, the subscriber count that had declined by 312 in the past 24 hours as Bella's audience arrived and mine departed. I set the phone face down. I had my framework, I had my bait. I had in the draft folder of my editing software the beginning of something that Bella was going to pick up and carry and build on and present as her own, and that was going to follow her permanently and publicly, in a way that she would not understand until the moment it was too late to matter. I didn't close the notifications. I let them run. They were data, and data was useful, and I had a use for it now. I opened a new document and labeled it Operation Fingerprint Phase 1. I started writing. The first video went live on a Thursday at 11 in the morning. Alex had spent the preceding week producing it with the same sustained attention he brought to all his work. The research was real. The sources were documented. The argument was built correctly from its premise to its midpoint. He wanted the video to be genuinely good, not as performance but as function. A piece of content that his actual audience would engage with carefully, that would stand up to scrutiny by anyone who knew the subject, and that would be, to a person watching it at the surface level for the purpose of extraction, indistinguishable from his standard output. The error arrived at the 23-minute mark. A framework for analyzing algorithmic feedback loops and recommendation system, built correctly through its first 3 components. And then in the transition to the 4th, a specific illogical inversion of the causal relationship between 2 variables, presented with the same confident fluency as everything preceding it, embedded in a sentence that sounded correct, and was structurally wrong in a way that required actual understanding of the underlying mechanics to identify. He had tested it on 3 people before releasing it. A friend from his university's computer science department, who caught it in 11 minutes and asked if it was intentional. A colleague who made content in an adjacent niche, who caught it in 20 minutes and flagged it in a comment he had asked her to hold. And himself, reading the transcript cold the following morning, which was when he confirmed that the error was what he needed it to be, embedded, reproducible, and dependent for its identification on comprehension rather than observation. He published it. He went about the rest of the Thursday with the specific, suspended attention of someone who has set something in motion and is now doing other things while the motion continues without them. Bella's version went live 47 hours later. Alex had set a notification for her channel, which he checked at 6 in the morning with the unhurried clinical attention of a researcher checking an experimental result. He opened her video. He moved to the equivalent structural position in her content. She compressed his 23 minutes into 11, the standard compression of a person removing the depth and retaining the skeleton, and he listened. She had used his framing. She had used his examples. She had used his specific transition language, modified enough to avoid verbatim reproduction but preserving the structure underneath the modification. And she had reproduced the error, not partially, completely, with the same confident fluency she brought to everything she had extracted from him. Presented as a sophisticated observation about algorithmic systems, to an audience of 2.3 million people who had no way of knowing it was wrong because they were not, by and large, the kind of audience that verified the analytical claims of the content they consumed. They were an audience that trusted her, and she had given them his mistake to trust. He opened the *Operation Fingerprint * document. He logged the date, the timestamp in her video, the exact phrasing she had used, the correspondence to his original error. He attached screenshots. He noted the view count at time of logging, 412,000 climbing. He closed the document. He opened a new project file in his editing software. The second video was built around a different analytical framework. This one about network effect dynamics in platform economies, a topic he had covered in an earlier video that she had also subsequently covered. He chose it because it was in her established pattern of topics, which meant she would recognize it as something she could work with. And because the error he was building into it this time was of a different structural type than the first one. He was not repeating himself, he was building a collection. The principle of forensic digital fingerprinting, in the context of watermarking and content authentication, was something Alex had covered 14 months ago in a video that had gotten 3,000 views, and that Bella had subsequently covered, using his framework, to an audience of 2 million. The irony of deploying the principle against the person who had plagiarized his explanation of the principle was not lost on him, and he had noted it in the *Operation Fingerprint * document without comment, because the irony was aesthetically satisfying but functionally irrelevant. What was functionally relevant was this: a single instance of error correspondence could be attributed to coincidence. 2 instances strengthened the case but remained arguable. 3 instances, particularly 3 instances of different structural error types, embedded at different points in different videos, all reproduced in Bella's corresponding content. 3 instances constituted a pattern that was statistically indistinguishable from deliberate, systematic copying. 3 instances was what he needed. The second video went live on a Tuesday. He had been careful about the timing, not too fast, because a pattern of rapid releases would alter his audience's experience of his content, and his audience was not collateral damage. He was building a trap, not burning his own channel to do it. Bella's version of the second video went live 61 hours after his. She reproduced the second error with the same completeness she had reproduced the first. The error this time was an inversion of a causal arrow in a network dynamics model, the kind of mistake that made the conclusion sound more dramatic and counterintuitive than the correct version, which was perhaps part of why she hadn't questioned it. Counterintuitive conclusions perform better on her format. She had reproduced it because it sounded right for her content, which was exactly what it was designed to sound like. Alex logged it: screenshots, timestamps, view count. He noted that the error had, in her version, generated comments from 3 people who had flagged it as incorrect, which she had responded to by pinning a comment from a 4th person defending her framing. The 4th person was wrong. He logged that too. He opened the 3rd project file. The 3rd video was the most technically sophisticated content he had produced in 3 years of making content. Not because of the trap. The trap in this one was, structurally, the simplest of the 3. A single wrong number embedded in an otherwise correct statistical framework that would change the conclusion of the entire analysis if you followed the math through, which a person who understood the analysis would do, and a person who was copying the argument without understanding it would not. The sophistication was in everything else: the research, the argument, the production. He had spent 11 days on it. It was, authentically and without any qualification related to what he was using it for, the best piece of work he had made. He published it on a Monday. He went to the coffee shop 2 blocks from his apartment and sat at the window table with his laptop and worked on other things. Because sitting in his workspace waiting for her to copy a video he had just published was not a use of time he was willing to make. She published her version in 53 hours. The wrong number, a percentage that changed by 14 points from his original to the correct value, 14 points that flipped the direction of the conclusion, appeared in her video at the 6-minute mark, delivered with the specific, confident cadence of someone presenting a fact they have not verified, because they are presenting it from a source they have not credited and cannot question. 6.3 million views in 36 hours. It was the best performing video she had made. He logged it. He sat with the log for a moment: 3 entries, 3 error types, 3 instances of complete documented reproduction, all attached to the video files, the timestamps, the screenshots, the view counts. The spreadsheet that had begun as a 2-month documentation of her copying his topics had become something more specific and more useful. A forensic record of a pattern that was not explainable by coincidence or independent parallel development, because the errors he had introduced were not the kind that 2 people arrived at independently. They were the kind that 1 person introduced and 1 person copied. He spent the following week building the package. Not the exposure that was coming, but not yet. The package he was building now was the sponsor package, a compiled document addressed to the 6 companies that were Bella's active brand partners, each of whom he had identified through the sponsor disclosures in her videos and verified through their public marketing communication. The document was 13 pages. It contained the 3 error correspondences, documented with timestamps and screenshots. It contained a brief technical explanation of why each error was an error, written accessibly enough that a marketing team could understand it without requiring domain expertise. It contained a section on the legal implications of sponsored content distributed at scale that contained factual errors attributable to plagiarism, which he had drafted with the assistance of a content law resource he had accessed through his university's alumni network. He was not a lawyer. The section was careful to position itself as informational rather than advisory. He sent the package on a Wednesday morning to 6 email addresses he had verified through the company's public press and partnership contact pages. He sent it from an email address attached to his channel's official domain, which he had registered 2 years ago, and which established him as a professional entity rather than an individual sending unsolicited complaints. He did not follow up. He did not expect immediate response. He was planting information in the minds of people whose professional function was to protect their brands, and he was giving them enough time to sit with that information before the next thing happened. The next thing was the conference. He had known about the Innovate Summit for 2 months, because Bella had announced her keynote appearance on every platform she maintained, with the specific, sustained promotional energy of someone for whom this appearance represented the highest point of a trajectory she had been performing for 2 years. 300 attendees, industry press, a live stream. A keynote titled Creative Innovation in the Digital Age which was, Alex noted without particular emphasis, a topic he had covered in a video 8 months ago that she had subsequently covered using his framework. He had registered for the conference press credential the same week she had announced the keynote. He had requested, through the credential application, access to the AV feed infrastructure, which was standard for press members producing live coverage of the event. The access was granted without special review, because press access to AV infrastructure for live coverage purposes was standard, and the credential application had been straightforward. He had used the 2 months since registration to build the comparison video, 12 minutes, 37 instances, each one documented with the specific illogical frame sequences highlighted in the systematic way of forensic evidence rather than the emotionally charged way of a call-up. His originals on the left, her versions on the right, the timestamps visible in both, the error correspondences highlighted in red, with brief technical annotations explaining what was wrong and why the error was not independently replicable. He had uploaded it to his channel as an unlisted video. It would not be public until he chose to make it public, which he had scheduled for the moment the conference AV system began playing it, so that the comparison would be available for every person who saw it on the conference screen to find independently, without him having to direct them to it. He had also, in the 48 hours before the conference, resubmitted the error fingerprints to YouTube's Content ID system, this time not as a copyright claim, but as a documented pattern correspondence for review, a different submission category that the platform's creator relations team could act on, which he had confirmed through a technical resource in the platform's creator documentation. He drove to the conference venue on the morning of the keynote. He checked in at the press registration desk. He received his lanyard and his credential and his access card for the AV infrastructure. He tested the uplink connection in the press area adjacent to the main stage. It was active. The conference's AV system was accessible through the credential. The comparison video was cued. He went to the wings. He watched Bella cross the stage toward the podium in the dress her stylist had chosen. He watched the spotlight find her. He watched 300 people give her the applause she had spent 2 years building toward, on the foundation of a catalog of content that had been extracted from a channel with 42,000 subscribers by a person who had never once, in any of the 2 years of extraction, thought to verify whether the work she was extracting from was something she was capable of understanding. She was not capable of understanding it. He had known this from the second video. A person who understood network dynamics does not reproduce a wrong causal arrow without flagging it. A person who understands statistical analysis does not reproduce a 14-point percentage error without noticing. She had reproduced all 3 errors completely because she had not understood any of the 3 arguments. And she had not understood any of the 3 arguments because understanding them was not what she had been doing with his content. She had been producing it. There was a difference. He looked at his phone. The uplink was active. The content ID submissions were processed. The sponsor notification emails had been sent 3 days ago and had generated, he knew from one reply he had received, a review process at a minimum of 2 of the 6 companies. The comparison video was queued to the conference AV system. The unlisted YouTube link was ready to go public on schedule. Bella reached the podium. She touched the microphone. "Thank you," she said. "I have to say this is surreal." Alex looked at his phone one more time. He pressed execute. The conference AV system received the execute command at the moment Bella finished her opening sentence. Not immediately visible, there was a processing interval of approximately 4 seconds between the command and the output, which was 4 seconds during which she continued speaking, during which the audience continued listening, during which the room continued being the room it had been for the preceding 8 minutes of her keynote. 4 seconds of ordinary conference time, unremarkable to everyone except Alex, who was counting them from the wings. Then the screen changed. Bella's opening slide, creative innovation in the digital age asterisk. Her name, her follower count, her verified checkmark disappeared. The conference's presentation system, receiving a new input through the AV infrastructure access credential, replaced it with a split screen. On the left, a video frame. Alex's workspace, 3 monitors, functional rather than photogenic, the specific, uncurated aesthetic of someone who makes content in a place built for making it rather than for being seen making it. His voice from the audio, explaining a framework for algorithmic feedback loops in recommendation systems. His timestamp visible in the corner, 14 months ago. On the right, Bella's studio. The ring lights, the branded backdrop, the carefully art-directed environment of a person for whom the production of the appearance of creation was as important as any content it contained. Her voice explaining the same framework. Her timestamp, 14 months ago plus 47 hours. A red circle appeared on the left frame, highlighting a specific section of the argument at the 23-minute mark. The same red circle appeared on the right frame at the corresponding point in her video. Beneath both frames, a text annotation in clean white type, identical logical error, reproduced verbatim, not independently replicable. The audience went quiet, not the held breath quiet of an audience receiving a speaker's dramatic pause, the different quiet of a room registering a dissonance, a quality of collective recalibration. The specific silence of 300 people simultaneously trying to understand the relationship between what they had been watching and what they were watching now. Bella turned. She turned the way people turn when something behind them has changed, and they have registered the change peripherally before consciously understanding what has changed. The physical response to information arriving before cognition has processed it. She looked at the screen. The comparison was on its second instance now, the network dynamics video, the wrong causal arrow highlighted in red on both frames, the annotation, causal inversion, reproduced verbatim, not independently replicable. What? She started. Stop. The microphone was still active, still sending her voice into the room and into the live stream that had been running since the keynote began, and what the microphone sent into the room in that moment was not a sentence. It was the specific, unmanaged sound of a person whose script has ended and who has not prepared for what happens when it does. Her production manager was in the front row. Alex could see him from the wings, a man in his 30s who had been watching the screen with the escalating expression of someone watching a disaster in progress and calculating, in real time, the size of the damage and the availability of exits. He was on his phone, not calling, texting rapidly with both thumbs, the texting of a person deploying damage control measures that they already understood were insufficient for the scale of what was on the screen. The third instance appeared. The statistical framework, the wrong percentage, highlighted in red, 14-point error, reproduced verbatim. Conclusion inverted from correct analysis. 6.3 million views, the annotation noted beneath the right frame. Sponsored content. Error propagated to audience of 6.3 m. The room had reorganized itself around what was on the screen. The journalists in the press section, 6 of them from 4 publications, who had come to cover a keynote about creative innovation and were now covering something considerably more significant, had their phones up. Not for photos of Bella, which was what they had been doing 8 minutes ago. For the screen. The live stream chat, which had been running in a sidebar on Alex's phone throughout, had shifted in the way that live stream chats shift when something unexpected has occurred, from comments about Bella's dress and congratulatory messages, and the ordinary ambient text of an audience watching something it expected to watch, to a different register, faster, more chaotic. The specific cadence of an online audience processing a revelation in real time and generating content about the processing simultaneously. Wait, what is this? Is that her video on the right? That's the same argument. The red circle. OMG, the red circle is on both. Alex looked at his phone. The unlisted YouTube link had gone public on schedule, triggered by the execute command's timestamp. He watched the view counter on his analytics dashboard begin to move, not the gradual accumulation of organic discovery, but the rapid, vertical movement of a link being shared simultaneously by many people who had just been given a reason to share it. On the stage, Bella had found her voice. Or she had found the voice she used when she was managing a situation she had decided to manage. The voice she had used in the video about him, the practiced, emotional register of a woman addressing an audience she needed to bring back to her. "I don't know what this is," she said into the microphone. Her voice was controlled. The control was visible, which is different from the control being invisible. Someone has clearly done something to the feed. This is not my presentation. It's my content, Alex said. Not loudly. He was in the wings, 15 feet from the stage, and the wings were not mic'd, and only the people nearest to him would have heard it. He said it because he needed to say it once in the space it was true in, and then the moment was the moment it was, and he was done with the saying. The screen moved to its compilation section. The 12-minute video condensed into its most concentrated evidence, 37 instances displayed in rapid sequence, each one with the red highlights, each one with the timestamp correspondence, each one with the brief annotation explaining the structural parallel. It moved through them at a pace designed for comprehension rather than spectacle. Not so fast that the individual instances blurred into an overwhelming montage, but fast enough that the accumulation of them, instance after instance after instance, produced its own kind of weight. At the 40-second mark of the compilation section, the sponsor logos appeared. Not Bella's sponsor logos. The sponsor logos as they appeared in her content, integrated, disclosed, the visual language of a paid partnership presented within her specific aesthetic, displayed on the left side of the screen alongside the corresponding sponsored video's error instances. A simple, factual presentation. This sponsored content contained this error, which was reproduced from this original source. The right side of the screen showed the sponsor logos as they appeared in the notification emails Alex had sent 3 days earlier. The same logos, the same companies, now identified as active brand partners of content that contained provably false information derived from plagiarized source material. The first logo disappeared from the screen. Not dramatically, it simply wasn't there anymore, replaced by a gray placeholder box, which was what happened when a brand partnership was terminated and the partner's visual assets were removed from the documentation. It happened because one of the 6 companies had, in the preceding 72 hours, reviewed the package Alex had sent, run it through their legal team, and made the decision that their brand's association with the content in question was not a risk their marketing budget could justify. The decision had apparently been pending. The execute command had not triggered it. The timing was coincidental, a function of corporate process running in parallel with Alex's timeline, the two things happening to converge on the same morning. But the convergence produced an effect that was visually indistinguishable from a causal relationship. On a 50-foot screen in front of 300 conference attendees and a live stream, a sponsor logo disappeared. Bella's production manager made a sound from the front row that the microphone on the stage did not pick up, but that Alex, from the wings, could hear clearly enough to identify as the sound of a person receiving information through their phone that they had been hoping not to receive. A second logo disappeared, then a third. The 3 logos that disappeared in the following 40 seconds had not disappeared because of the execute command, or because of what was on the screen, or because of anything Alex had triggered in the preceding 5 minutes. They had disappeared because 3 companies had, over the preceding 72 hours, made decisions that were now executing through automated partnership termination processes. The documentation he had sent had done its work days ago. The screen was showing the work's results, happening to be visible at the most consequential possible moment in the most consequential possible room. He had not planned the simultaneity of it. He had planned everything that made the simultaneity possible. Bella was no longer speaking into the microphone. She was standing at the podium, and the spotlight was still on her because no one in the technical crew had been given an instruction to change it. And the room was arranged around her the way a room arranges itself around the person who is supposed to be the center of it. And she was in the spotlight and on the stage, and behind her, the screen was showing what it was showing. She looked at the audience looked at the screen, the journalists looked at their phones. The live stream chat had exceeded the platform's visible comment velocity. The messages arriving faster than the display could render them individually, reducing to a continuous scroll that conveyed volume without individual legibility. Her production manager stood. He walked toward the stage steps with the purposeful, unhurried movement of a person executing a decision they had made quickly but were carrying out without theater. He reached the stage. He went to Bella. He said something close to her ear, something that did not reach the microphone. She looked at him, she looked at the screen, she looked at the audience. And then she walked off the stage. Not dramatically, not the storming exit of a person making a statement with their departure. She walked off with the specific, contained quality of someone who has been told that staying is worse than leaving, and has accepted the assessment. The exit of a person who has run the available options in real time and concluded that all of them are bad and this one is the least bad. She passed within 6 feet of where Alex was standing in the wing. She didn't look at him, or she looked straight ahead with the focused precision of someone who has decided not to look at a specific thing and is executing that decision. He couldn't tell which. He watched her go. The conference's host took the stage at the 12-minute mark of the compilation, which was when it ended, and addressed the audience with the specific, professional composure of a moderator who has spent a career managing events that do not go as planned and who has developed an equanimity about the gap between a program and its execution. "We're going to take a brief break," she said. "Please enjoy the networking area. We'll resume in 20 minutes. The audience did not go to the networking area. The audience went to their phones. Alex walked out of the wings. Not through the stage, through the side corridor that connected the wings to the main conference floor, which he took at a normal pace, with his press lanyard and his laptop bag and the uplink adapter that he had disconnected and put in his pocket before leaving the wings. He found a chair in the corridor outside the main hall and sat in it and opened his phone. The YouTube analytics showed the comparison video at 2.1 million views. Not climbing, accelerating. The view count moving with the exponential quality of content that has found a distribution mechanism that is not organic discovery but active sharing. The specific propagation pattern of something that people are sending to other people, because they want those people to have seen it immediately. The live stream clip of the screen change, the moment Bella turned and found the comparison behind her, the specific, unmanaged sound she made before she found her voice, had been clipped and uploaded to 4 platforms within 11 minutes of it occurring. The fastest clip had 800,000 views. It would have more by the time Alex finished reading about it. His channel had gained 11,000 subscribers since the execute command. He was watching the number move in the analytics dashboard, which he had open in one tab alongside the comparison videos metrics, and the social media monitoring tool he had set up 2 weeks earlier to track Bella-related conversation. The monitoring tool was showing a conversation volume that had exceeded its display scale. The graph's y-axis having been automatically adjusted 3 times in the preceding 40 minutes to accommodate numbers it had not been configured to expect. The smear campaign video, Bella's 12-minute video calling him a stalker, presenting his DM as evidence of harassment, generating 2 million views in 18 hours and 5 months of comment section warfare on his channel, was accumulating a different kind of comment activity than it had in the months since its publication. He could see it in the monitoring tool's sentiment analysis, which was a blunt instrument but sufficient for the current purpose. The sentiment had inverted. The comments arriving now were not the mass report campaign of a fanbase that had been told what to think. They were the comments of people who had just watched a 50-foot screen at a tech conference and were revising their assessment of who had been telling the truth. His phone rang. A number he didn't recognize, with an area code he associated with the Bay Area. He looked at it for a moment, then he answered. "Is this Alex?" A woman's voice, professional, with the specific cadence of someone whose job required her to make calls like this regularly. "Yes," he said. "I'm calling from the partnership development team at," she named a platform, a large one. The kind whose partnership development team did not typically call 42,000 subscriber channels on a Tuesday afternoon. "We've been watching the situation today. We'd like to schedule a conversation with you about a creator partnership program we think you'd be a strong fit for. Are you available this week?" He was available this week. He said so. "Great," she said. "We'll send a calendar invite. And for what it's worth, what you did today was methodologically impressive." He thanked her, he hung up. Bella's channel received a community guidelines strike from YouTube the following morning, triggered by the content ID cross-reference submissions Alex had filed, not the original copyright reports, which had been correctly dismissed months earlier, but the documented pattern correspondence submission, which the platform's creator relations team had reviewed and found sufficient, in combination with the public evidence of the preceding day, to initiate a formal content review. The review took 4 days. 3 of her videos were removed. The others were demonetized pending further review. Her ability to access the YouTube Partner Program was suspended while the review was ongoing. The sponsor lawsuits came later, not from Alex, who had no legal standing to sue for damages from sponsored content built on ideas that could not be copyrighted, but from 2 of the 6 companies whose logos had disappeared from the screen on Tuesday. The legal theories were not intellectual property claim, they were breach of contract claims, specifically the representations and warranties clauses in influencer agreements that required sponsored content to be original and accurate. Content that contained documented errors reproduced from an unacknowledged source was arguable on both counts. The 2 companies argued. Their legal teams were larger than Bella's. She posted a response video 6 days after the conference. It was different in register from anything she had previously posted, quieter, less produced, the ring lights dimmed or absent. She acknowledged overlapping content with another creator. She said she had not been aware of the extent of it. She said she was taking time to reflect. The comments were not what her comments had typically been. Her subscriber count at the time of the response video was 2.1 million, down from 3.2 million at the time of the keynote, a decline of 1.1 million in 6 days. The decline was continuing at a rate that the monitoring tool showed as roughly 30,000 per day, which was the rate of decline that occurs when an audience that was built on a particular understanding of a creator has had that understanding revised and is making individual decisions about whether to remain. Many of them were finding Alex's channel in the process. By the end of the second week, he had 483,000 subscribers. By the end of the month, he had 612,000. He released a video on a Monday 3 weeks after the conference, 31 minutes. The subject was the forensic architecture of the operation he had run, the error trap design, the fingerprinting logic, the content ID submission strategy, the sponsor notification process, the conference AV access mechanism. He explained all of it in the same analytical register he had always used, with the same care and density of documentation. He explained it not as a victory lap, but as a case study in the application of systematic thinking to a specific problem, which was the kind of content he made. The error traps he explained in the final section were not templates. They were situation-specific, designed for the specific laziness pattern of the specific person who was the specific problem. The value was not in the technique. The value was in the principle that a person who copies without understanding becomes dependent on the source they are copying from, and that dependence is a vulnerability. He had not invented the principle. He had covered it 14 months ago in a video about misinformation propagation, which Bella had subsequently covered, using his framework, to an audience of 2 million people who did not know they were receiving his principle from a source that had not understood it. He had not mentioned that irony in the video. He had noted it in the * operation fingerprint * document months ago, and it had been sufficient then, and it remained sufficient. The video got 8.4 million views. He sat at his desk in his functional, uncurated workspace and watched the number move and thought about the specific, accurate way to describe what had happened. Because describing things accurately was what he did. She had built her empire on his stolen ideas, thinking he was too invisible to fight back. She had become the biggest cautionary tale on the internet because she forgot who wrote the code to her success. Both of those things were true. He opened a new project file. He had a new video to make. The subject had nothing to do with Bella. It was a topic he had been developing for 6 weeks, before the conference, before the execute command, before any of the preceding 3 months of construction and patience. It was something he found genuinely interesting and wanted to understand better, and believed his audience would benefit from thinking about carefully. He started scripting the work as it had always been.